The ocean has always been a place of mystery. Long before ships carried nations across the world, before great ports filled with merchants and sailors, before maps carefully traced the edges of continents, there was only the endless horizon, a vast and moving world of tides, currents, storms, and darkness. For those who traveled upon it, the sea offered opportunity, but it also demanded respect. A calm morning could transform into a violent storm by nightfall. A familiar coastline could disappear beneath fog. A safe harbor could become impossible to find once the sun sank below the horizon. And so, along the edges of the world's oceans, humans began creating something extraordinary. A light. At first, it may have been nothing more than a small fire burning on a distant hill. A simple flame watched over by a few careful hands. But to a sailor returning home after days or weeks at sea, that tiny glow represented something much greater. It was a sign that land was near, a reminder that there was safety beyond the darkness. Across thousands of years, those small fires would become towering stone structures, elegant works of architecture, and some of the most recognizable landmarks ever built. They would rise above cliffs, stand alone on dangerous rocks, and endure the endless rhythm of waves crashing against their foundations. They became known as lighthouses. A lighthouse is a quiet invention. Unlike castles, they were not built to display power. Unlike monuments, they were not created to celebrate a ruler or an empire. Their purpose was simple and humble, to help someone find their way. Every night, when the world around them disappeared into darkness, lighthouse keepers climbed narrow spiral staircases, cleaned glass lenses, trimmed lamps, and waited patiently for ships that might never be seen. They lived in isolation, surrounded by wind and water, carrying out a duty that few people would ever notice. But every beam of light that crossed the waves carried a story. It carried the story of the sailor searching for a harbor after a long journey, the fisherman returning home beneath a cloudy sky, the merchant ship carrying goods between distant shores, the family waiting by the window, hoping to see a vessel return safely. For centuries, lighthouses were silent companions to humanity's greatest adventures across the sea. They watched the rise and fall of empires. They witnessed the expansion of trade routes and the exploration of unknown lands. They stood through wars, storms, and changing technology. They saw wooden sailing ships replaced by steam-powered vessels, and eventually watched as modern navigation systems transformed the way humans traveled across the oceans. Yet even as technology changed, the lighthouse remained something more than a tool of navigation. There was something comforting about seeing a light shining from a lonely tower in the middle of the night. Something reassuring about knowing that, somewhere along a dark coastline, a small flame continued to burn. Perhaps this is why lighthouses have captured the imagination of people around the world. They represent guidance when the path ahead is uncertain. They symbolize patience, endurance, and hope. They remind us that even in the darkest moments, there can always be a point of light waiting in the distance. Tonight, we will journey through the long history of these remarkable structures. We will travel back to the ancient world, where the first great beacons guided ships into legendary harbors. We will explore the towering lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the wonders of the ancient world, and discover how early civilizations learned to tame the dangers of the sea. We will walk along medieval coastlines, where simple fires and watchtowers helped sailors navigate unfamiliar waters. We will enter the golden age of lighthouse building, when engineers created impossible structures on lonely rocks surrounded by crashing waves. We will step inside the lives of lighthouse keepers, discovering what it meant to live in a tower above the ocean, separated from the world but connected to every ship that passed in the distance. We will explore the brilliant science behind lighthouse lenses, the stories of famous towers, and the quiet coastal communities that grew around these guiding lights. And we will eventually arrive in the modern age, where many lighthouses no longer require keepers, and many have become historic reminders of a different time. But before we begin our journey through centuries of history, imagine a quiet shoreline many years ago. The sun has disappeared beyond the horizon. The last colors of evening have faded from the sky. Waves gently roll toward the rocks below. The wind moves through the grass along the cliffs. Far above the water, inside a small room of glass and metal, a keeper carefully tends to a lamp. Outside, the darkness stretches endlessly across the sea. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a ship moves slowly through the waves. The sailors cannot see the land. They cannot see the harbor. They cannot see the rocks waiting beneath the surface. But then, through the darkness, a familiar flash appears. A beam of light sweeps across the ocean, and for a moment, the vastness of the sea feels a little smaller. The sailors know they are not lost. Someone is watching. Someone is waiting. The light has found them. And now, our journey begins. Long before towers stood along the shore, before great lenses sent beams of light across the waves, and before ships could rely on modern instruments to find their way home, humanity had already begun a lifelong relationship with the sea. The ocean was both a mystery and a necessity. For early coastal communities, the water provided food, transportation, and connection to distant lands. The shoreline was a place where forests met waves, where fishermen launched simple boats into uncertain waters, and where small villages slowly grew into important centers of human life. The sea offered abundance, but it also carried danger. A fisherman could leave the shore beneath a clear morning sky and find himself surrounded by storms before nightfall. A sailor following the coastline could lose sight of familiar landmarks in thick fog. A vessel returning after a long voyage could pass within sight of home and still never find the entrance to a safe harbor. The ocean did not reveal its secrets easily. For thousands of years, those who traveled across the water learned to pay close attention to the world around them. They studied the movement of waves, the direction of winds, the patterns of birds, and the changing colors of the sky. They memorized coastlines and recognized the shapes of distant mountains rising above the horizon. Before there were maps, there were memories. A sailor might know a particular stretch of coast because of a distinctive cliff formation. Another might recognize a harbor by the smell of nearby forests or the sound of waves breaking against hidden rocks. Knowledge was passed from one generation to the next, carried through stories told beside fires and aboard boats. The sea was a teacher, and those who survived learned to listen carefully. The earliest sailors did not venture far from land. Their small wooden boats were vulnerable to unpredictable weather, and navigation was a constant challenge. Staying close to shore allowed them to use natural landmarks as guides. A tall mountain, a narrow inlet, or a certain group of trees could serve as a familiar signpost. But as human curiosity grew, so did the desire to travel farther. Communities began trading with neighbors across bays and along distant coastlines. Simple fishing trips became longer journeys. Boats became larger and stronger. Sailors began crossing wider stretches of water, carrying goods, stories, and ideas between cultures. With every new journey, the need for guidance became greater. A ship could spend days following the coastline only to find itself approaching unfamiliar waters. A captain entering a harbor at night needed some way to recognize the entrance. A merchant vessel carrying valuable cargo needed protection from hidden reefs and dangerous shorelines. The challenge was not simply reaching the destination. The challenge was finding the way back. Long before the construction of true lighthouses, humans experimented with simpler forms of guidance. Fires were placed on high points overlooking the water. Torches were lit on hills near important harbors. Watchmen stood at coastal locations, keeping flames alive through the night. These early signals were not yet the magnificent towers that would later define coastlines, but they carried the same purpose. They were messages sent across the darkness. A distant fire told sailors that land was near. It marked the location of a harbor. It warned them away from dangerous areas. It offered reassurance during moments when the world beyond the ship disappeared into darkness. The idea was simple, but its impact was enormous. A single flame could connect two worlds, the uncertain world of the ocean and the familiar world of home. As civilizations grew around the Mediterranean Sea, the importance of maritime travel increased. The sea became a highway connecting cities, islands, and distant civilizations. Traders carried pottery, metals, spices, and precious goods between ports. Explorers searched for new routes. Fishermen ventured farther from shore in search of better catches. Every ship that left the harbor carried a little piece of uncertainty with it. The sailors knew the risks waiting beyond the coastline. They knew that storms could appear without warning. They knew that darkness could hide dangerous rocks beneath the waves. They knew that even the most experienced navigator could be challenged by the vastness of the sea. And so, humanity continued searching for better ways to guide those who traveled across it. The first solutions were humble: a fire on a hill, a torch beside a harbor, a signal from a distant shore. But these simple beginnings represented something much larger. They showed that humans were not willing to simply accept the dangers of the ocean. They were willing to study it, understand it, and find ways to make the journey safer. The desire to guide others through darkness would eventually lead to some of the greatest engineering achievements of the ancient world. Stone towers would rise above coastlines. Lamps would burn through countless nights. Keepers would dedicate their lives to maintaining these beacons. But every lighthouse, no matter how tall or impressive, would always carry the memory of those first coastal fires. Because before there were towers of stone, there was only the hope that a small light on the shore could help someone find their way home. And from that simple idea, the history of the lighthouse began. As humanity became more confident upon the water, the relationship between land and sea began to change. The earliest sailors had looked toward the coastline for guidance, relying on familiar hills, rocky outcrops, and natural landmarks to find their way. But as ships traveled farther and trade networks expanded, the simple features of the landscape were no longer enough. The sea routes were becoming busier. More vessels crossed the waters carrying valuable cargo, travelers and explorers. Harbors that were once small fishing settlements grew into important centers of commerce. Ships arrived from distant shores carrying unfamiliar goods and stories from places that many people would never see. But every journey across the water carried uncertainty. During the day, sailors could study the horizon and recognize the shapes of the land. They could watch the movement of clouds and birds. They could use the position of the sun to estimate their direction. Night was different. When darkness covered the ocean, the familiar world disappeared. The coastline became a shadow. Dangerous rocks and shallow waters vanished beneath the waves. A harbor entrance that seemed obvious during daylight could become nearly impossible to find after sunset. This created a new challenge. How could sailors recognize where they were when the sun was gone? The answer began with something humans had controlled for thousands of years: fire. Across the ancient world, communities discovered that a flame placed in the right location could become a guide visible from the water. Fires were built on elevated ground, near important ports, and along dangerous stretches of coastline. These early beacons were simple, but their purpose was revolutionary. A distant glow could tell a sailor that a harbor was nearby. Generations of sailors learned to recognize these signals, just as travelers on land learned the paths between towns and villages. The idea of guiding ships with light was especially important in the Mediterranean world. This region was a natural crossroads of ancient civilization. Its scattered islands, sheltered bays, and long coastlines encouraged exploration and trade. Civilizations rose around its shores, connected by ships carrying everything from grain and wine to metals, pottery, and precious materials. The sea was not simply a barrier between communities. It was a road. But like any road, it required signs. Ancient mariners developed many ways to navigate. They studied the stars, learning to recognize patterns in the night sky. They watched the direction of winds and currents. They memorized the locations of islands and coastal landmarks. Yet even the most skilled sailors needed help when approaching land after dark. A light on the shore offered something navigation tools could not provide: confidence. It was a physical reminder that somewhere ahead was a safe place to arrive. Some of the earliest known coastal signals were created by civilizations that understood the importance of maritime travel. The ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Phoenicians all relied heavily on the sea. Their ships connected distant regions and allowed cultures to exchange ideas, technologies, and traditions. The Phoenicians, famous for their skill as sailors and traders, traveled throughout the Mediterranean and beyond. Their journeys required an intimate understanding of coastlines and harbors. For sailors like these, a visible marker near the shore could mean the difference between a successful voyage and disaster. The Greeks, surrounded by hundreds of islands and peninsulas, also developed a deep connection with the sea. Their mythology was filled with stories of voyages, storms, and encounters with unknown waters. The ocean represented both adventure and danger. Every journey required courage, and every safe return was worth celebrating. As these societies advanced, coastal markers became more organized. Instead of temporary fires built wherever they were needed, communities began creating permanent structures where flames could be maintained. These early structures were not yet the elegant lighthouses that would appear centuries later. They lacked the advanced engineering, powerful lamps, and carefully designed lenses of the future. But the essential idea had arrived. A permanent place where a light could burn through the night. This concept represented a major change in how humans interacted with the sea. Instead of simply adapting to the dangers of ocean travel, people began reshaping the environment to make journeys safer. The importance of these early beacons extended beyond navigation. They became symbols of thriving ports and prosperous civilizations. A harbor with a guiding light was a harbor prepared for visitors. It showed that a community valued connection with the wider world. As trade expanded, so did the ambition behind these structures. Simple fires would eventually become taller towers. Small flames would become carefully protected lamps. Local signals would become famous landmarks known across entire seas. The ancient world was beginning to understand that a light could do more than illuminate the darkness. It could guide, it could protect, and it could connect people separated by miles of unpredictable water. The first beacons were humble beginnings, but they carried the same purpose that would define every lighthouse built afterward. A promise that, no matter how far a ship traveled into the unknown, there would always be a light waiting somewhere along the shore. Among all the great wonders of the ancient world, few captured the imagination quite like a tower that stood beside the sea. It was not a palace filled with treasures. It was not a temple dedicated to a powerful ruler. It was not a monument built to celebrate victory. It was a guide. Rising above the harbor of Alexandria in ancient Egypt, the great lighthouse known as the Pharos became one of humanity's most remarkable achievements. To understand why such a structure was created, we must first understand the city it protected. Alexandria was unlike almost any other city of the ancient world. Founded in 331 BCE by Alexander the Great, the city was built along the coast of Egypt beside the Mediterranean Sea. Its location was carefully chosen. It sat near the mouth of the Nile River, where one of the world's greatest waterways met one of the world's busiest seas. This position gave Alexandria an extraordinary advantage. Ships traveling from Europe, Africa, and Asia could all pass through its harbor. Over time, Alexandria became a center of trade, culture, and learning. But there was a challenge. The coastline around Alexandria was not easy for ships to approach. The waters near the harbor contained dangerous underwater features, including shallow areas and hidden obstacles that could threaten vessels attempting to enter. During the day, experienced sailors could study the coastline and navigate carefully. But at night, the dangers became much greater. A ship approaching from the open sea needed a way to recognize the entrance to the harbor. It needed a signal. The island of Pharos, located just offshore from Alexandria, provided the perfect location. Here, engineers began constructing a tower unlike anything the world had seen before. It was designed in several levels, with each section becoming narrower as the tower climbed toward the sky. At its base stood the largest portion of the structure, a massive foundation built to withstand the forces of the sea. Above it rose additional sections, including a central tower and a smaller upper chamber where the beacon burned. At the very top, a fire illuminated the darkness. The Lighthouse of Alexandria was not simply tall. It was a statement. It demonstrated what could be achieved when architecture, engineering, and human imagination came together. At a time when most structures were limited by local materials and traditional methods, the Pharos represented a bold attempt to conquer one of humanity's oldest challenges, finding a way through the darkness. Ancient sailors approaching Alexandria would have seen the lighthouse rising above the coastline from miles away. During the day, the tower itself served as a landmark. At night, its flame became a guiding signal. Imagine standing aboard an ancient wooden ship, surrounded by the endless movement of the Mediterranean. The wind fills the sails, waves move beneath the vessel, and the coastline remains hidden in the darkness. Then, far ahead, a light appears. A small glow at first, then brighter, then unmistakable. The sailors know they are approaching Alexandria. The journey is almost complete. The Pharos became more than a practical tool. It became a symbol of the city itself. Ancient writers spoke of its beauty and importance, and travelers from across the Mediterranean came to see it. It represented Alexandria's role as a meeting place between different cultures and a gateway connecting distant worlds. Over the centuries, legends grew around the lighthouse. Some stories claimed that a powerful mirror at the top of the tower could reflect sunlight across enormous distances, or even identify ships far out at sea. While these tales were likely exaggerated, they reveal something important. People viewed the Pharos as almost beyond ordinary human achievement. To ancient observers, a tower that could send light across the water seemed almost magical. But the true wonder was not magic. It was human effort. The lighthouse required careful planning, skilled builders, and countless hours of labor. It represented generations of knowledge about architecture, stonework, navigation, and the forces of nature. It also represented a new idea. The coast was no longer something humans simply had to fear. It was something they could understand and improve. The Pharos stood for centuries, surviving storms, political changes, and the rise and fall of civilizations around it. But like all structures built by humans, it eventually faced the passage of time. Earthquakes damaged the tower repeatedly, and over many centuries the once great lighthouse slowly disappeared from the landscape. By the medieval period, the remains of the Pharos had largely vanished, yet its influence never disappeared. The very word lighthouse carries the memory of Pharos, and countless coastal towers built afterward followed the example established by this ancient marvel. Engineers and sailors continued pursuing the same goal that inspired its creation, creating a reliable guide between the dangers of the sea and the safety of the shore. The great lighthouse of Alexandria was the beginning of a new chapter in maritime history. It proved that a single light, placed high enough above the waves, could guide countless journeys. It showed that a structure built for a simple purpose could become something far greater, a symbol of human curiosity and determination. For the sailors who saw its flame shining across the Mediterranean, the Pharos was a promise. Beyond the darkness was land. Beyond the waves was safety. And waiting above the harbor was a light that had been built just for them. The legacy of the great lighthouse of Alexandria did not end with the ancient world's fascination with its towering presence. Its greatest achievement was not simply the structure itself, but the idea behind it. A light beside the sea could transform the way people traveled. It could make dangerous waters more accessible. It could help connect distant communities and support the growth of trade. As centuries passed, this idea spread throughout the Mediterranean and beyond. No civilization embraced the importance of the sea quite like Rome. At the height of the Roman Empire, an enormous network of roads connected cities across Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. But while roads carried people and goods across land, the sea carried the empire's greatest ambitions. Coastal cities became centers of commerce and culture. The Mediterranean was no longer just a body of water. To Rome, it was a highway. But every highway needs markers. As Roman influence expanded, so did the need for safer navigation. The empire depended on reliable shipping routes, and dangerous coastlines could threaten both economic prosperity and military strength. The Romans began improving harbors throughout their territories. Among these improvements were lighthouses. Roman engineers took inspiration from earlier Greek and Egyptian examples, but developed their own approach. They built sturdy towers at important ports, river entrances, and strategic coastal locations. These structures served as both practical navigation tools and symbols of Roman organization. A lighthouse near a Roman harbor was a declaration. This was a place connected to the empire. This was a place where ships could arrive safely. This was a place where Rome's influence reached the sea. Unlike the towering fame of Alexandria's Pharos, many Roman lighthouses were smaller and more practical. They were built to serve specific locations rather than become wonders of the world. Yet their importance was enormous. A ship arriving at a Roman port after sunset could look toward the coastline and search for a familiar beacon. The glow from a lighthouse could guide a captain toward calmer waters and away from dangerous areas. The technology remained relatively simple. Most ancient lighthouse lights were created using burning wood, charcoal, or oil lamps. The challenge was not creating a powerful beam like modern lighthouses, but placing the light high enough that it could be seen from a distance. Roman builders understood this principle and used their engineering skills to create durable structures that could withstand the harsh coastal environment. One of the most famous surviving examples of Roman lighthouse construction is the Tower of Hercules, located near the modern city of A Coruña in Spain. Built during the Roman period, likely in the late 1st or early 2nd century CE, the tower stood as a guide for ships approaching the dangerous Atlantic coastline. Unlike the calmer waters of parts of the Mediterranean, the Atlantic presented new challenges. Strong currents, unpredictable weather, and rocky shores made navigation difficult. The Tower of Hercules became a guardian of that coastline. Over the centuries, it was modified and restored, but its survival offers a rare glimpse into the engineering abilities of the Romans and their understanding of maritime safety. The Romans also built lighthouses throughout Britain, Gaul, and other coastal regions of their empire. Some were placed near military ports. Others protected important trade routes. Many stood near river mouths, where ships transitioning between open water and inland waterways faced new dangers. These structures were part of a larger Roman philosophy. The empire was built on organization. Roman engineers did not simply construct individual buildings. They created systems. Roads connected cities. Aqueducts carried water. Harbors supported trade. And lighthouses helped maintain the movement of ships across vast distances. A lighthouse was a small piece of a much larger machine. It allowed goods to move more efficiently. It helped sailors arrive safely. It strengthened the connections between places separated by hundreds of miles of water. Beyond their practical purpose, Roman lighthouses also carried a deeper meaning. They represented humanity's ability to create order in an unpredictable world. The sea would always remain powerful. Storms would still arrive. Waves would still crash against the shore. But through careful planning and engineering, humans could create places of safety within that uncertainty. A Roman sailor approaching a harbor at night might have seen a familiar sight, a distant flame burning above the darkness. That light meant civilization was near. It meant there was a place to rest, trade, and continue the journey ahead. But eventually, even Rome's greatest achievements would face the passage of time. As the empire weakened and fragmented, many coastal systems fell into decline. Some lighthouses were abandoned. Others lost their original purpose as trade routes changed and cities transformed. Yet the idea survived. The Romans had helped spread the concept of the lighthouse across Europe and beyond. They showed that these structures were not only useful but essential to a connected world. Long after Roman ships disappeared from the seas, their towers continued to inspire future generations of builders and sailors. The flame that once guided Roman merchants and soldiers became part of a much longer story. A story of humanity's ongoing effort to bring light to the edge of the unknown. Empires, like the tides, eventually recede. As the Western Roman Empire faded during the 5th century, many of the carefully maintained systems that had connected its vast territories began to change. The sea, however, remained exactly as it had always been. The waves still rolled against the shore, and sailors still searched for safe places to land before nightfall. Many Roman lighthouses continued to stand, but not all of them remained active. Without the centralized organization that had once maintained them, some towers slowly crumbled. Others were repurposed as watchtowers, fortifications, or simple landmarks. In many places, the brilliant network of coastal lights became scattered and uncertain. Yet the knowledge of guiding ships was never truly lost. Instead, it became the responsibility of local communities. Along Europe's rugged coastlines, monasteries often occupied isolated headlands overlooking the sea. The monks who lived there sought quiet places, but they also became unexpected guardians of passing sailors. On stormy evenings, They sometimes lit fires on nearby cliffs or church towers. These flames were humble compared to the great beacon of Alexandria, but they served the same purpose. A light meant that people lived nearby. A light meant shelter might be found before dawn. The ringing of monastery bells also became familiar sounds along many coasts. In thick fog, when even a fire could disappear into the mist, the steady toll of a bell helped sailors judge their distance from shore. The sound drifted across the water, sometimes faint, sometimes clear, carried by the changing wind. For those aboard small wooden ships, these simple signals could be deeply comforting. Navigation during the Middle Ages remained a demanding skill. Most voyages hugged the coastline whenever possible. Captains preferred familiar waters, stopping frequently at ports rather than crossing great stretches of open sea. They still relied on memory, experience, and careful observation. The North Star guided many travelers across northern waters, while experienced sailors learned to recognize seasonal constellations that marked the passing months. During daylight, they watched seabirds circling above fishing grounds, noted the color of the water, and recognized distant cliffs whose shapes had become as familiar as old friends. But nature was never predictable. Dense fog could swallow an entire coastline within minutes. Winter storms arrived with astonishing speed. Powerful tides transformed peaceful channels into rushing rivers of water. Even an experienced crew understood that the sea demanded patience as much as courage. These dangers gave rise to countless stories. Along nearly every coastline, legends grew about mysterious lights seen over the water. Some sailors spoke of ghostly lanterns drifting above the waves, tempting ships toward hidden rocks. Others believed spirits protected certain harbors, guiding worthy travelers home while misleading the careless. Strange lights caused by natural gases or unusual weather became woven into local folklore, passed from one generation to the next beside hearth fires and harbor taverns. Whether true or imagined, these tales reflected an important truth. When visibility disappeared, even a small light became powerful. Communities also developed practical ways of helping one another. Fishing villages took turns maintaining beacon fires during harsh weather. Harbor watchmen remained awake through long nights, adding wood to bonfires when ships were expected. Families living near dangerous points understood that the flame they tended might save strangers they would never meet. It was a quiet act of generosity. No grand monuments announced these efforts. There were no famous architects or celebrated engineers. Only ordinary people accepting the responsibility of watching over their stretch of coastline. Meanwhile, shipbuilding continued to improve. Merchant vessels became larger and capable of carrying greater cargo. Northern Europe saw the rise of sturdy ships that could withstand rougher seas, while Mediterranean merchants slowly expanded their trading networks once more. As commerce recovered, ports became busier. Markets filled with wool, timber, salt, grain, wine, and spices arriving from distant lands. Coastal towns prospered as travelers, craftsmen, and merchants passed through their gates. With every increase in maritime traffic came a familiar realization. The sea still needed guides. Although the Middle Ages are sometimes remembered as a quieter chapter in the history of lighthouse building, they served as an important bridge between the ancient and modern worlds. The great towers of antiquity had demonstrated what was possible. The local beacons of medieval communities ensured that the tradition never disappeared. Generation after generation, people continued to light fires, ring bells, and keep watch over dark waters. Their methods were often simple, but their purpose remained unchanged. Every evening, somewhere along Europe's coasts, someone stepped into the fading light carrying fresh wood or a lantern. They climbed a hill, a church tower, or a weathered stone platform. They struck a spark. The flame caught. Soon another quiet beacon glowed against the night, visible to ships making their slow journey across restless seas. These forgotten lights rarely appeared in history books, yet they carried the ancient tradition forward through centuries of change. Without them, the remarkable age of exploration that was soon to dawn might have looked very different indeed. As the Middle Ages gave way to a new era, Europe's attention gradually turned outward. For centuries, most sailors had remained close to familiar coastlines, moving carefully from one harbor to the next. The sea was respected, but rarely challenged. Beyond the horizon lay uncertainty, and few captains wished to gamble with lives and valuable cargo. By the 15th century, improvements in shipbuilding, navigation, and map-making encouraged longer voyages than ever before. Merchants searched for new markets, rulers hoped to expand their influence, and explorers dreamed of discovering routes that no European sailor had yet recorded. The age of exploration was beginning. Along the western edge of Europe, Portugal became one of its earliest leaders. Portuguese mariners sailed farther down the coast of Africa than previous generations had imagined possible. Each expedition returned with new knowledge. Coastlines were carefully measured, currents were observed, and maps slowly became more complete. No voyage answered every question. Instead, each journey added another small piece to the world's great puzzle. As ships ventured farther from home, ports took on a new importance. A harbor was no longer simply a place to unload cargo. It became a place to repair damaged vessels, replenish fresh water, gather supplies, and wait for favorable winds before attempting another leg of the journey. The return home could be just as challenging as the voyage outward. After months at sea, weary sailors longed for the first sight of familiar land. Salt had covered every rope and sail. Wooden hulls creaked after endless weeks riding the waves. Fresh food had become scarce, and everyone aboard looked toward the horizon with quiet hope. Finding the correct harbor quickly could mean the difference between safety and disaster. This growing need inspired many coastal communities to improve their navigation aids. Older beacon sites were repaired, while new towers appeared near increasingly busy ports. Though still modest by later standards, these structures reflected a changing world. They welcomed not only local fishermen, but travelers arriving from distant kingdoms. Meanwhile, navigation itself continued to evolve. The magnetic compass became more widely used across Europe, allowing sailors to estimate direction even when clouds hid the stars. More accurate charts, known as portolan maps, recorded coastlines, harbors, and compass bearings with remarkable detail for their time. Yet these new tools did not replace the need for visible landmarks. A compass could suggest the direction of land. A lighthouse confirmed that it was truly there. As maritime traffic increased, Certain coastlines became famous for both opportunity and danger. The Atlantic shores of Portugal, Spain, France, and Britain were beautiful but unforgiving. Powerful tides, submerged rocks, and sudden storms tested even experienced captains. Thick banks of fog could appear with little warning, hiding cliffs until they were dangerously close. The sea rewarded preparation. Communities that invested in reliable harbor lights gained important advantages. Merchants preferred ports that could be entered safely after sunset or during uncertain weather. Fishing fleets benefited from dependable landmarks when returning before dawn. A well-maintained beacon quietly strengthened an entire local economy. By the late 15th century, remarkable voyages captured the imagination of Europe. Ships crossed oceans that earlier generations had scarcely considered navigable. Familiar maps expanded year after year as new coastlines entered the world's growing collection of knowledge. Each successful expedition relied upon countless moments of careful navigation. The great names remembered in history did not travel alone. Every famous captain depended upon crews who read the stars, trimmed the sails, watched the weather, and searched patiently for the welcoming lights of home. It is easy to imagine exploration as a series of dramatic discoveries, but much of it consisted of ordinary routines repeated with extraordinary discipline. Lanterns were checked each evening. Anchors were inspected. Water barrels were counted. Charts were updated. And somewhere along the shore, another beacon was prepared before darkness arrived. As exploration expanded beyond Europe, the tradition of building coastal lights expanded with it. New settlements established along unfamiliar shores often placed great importance on marking safe entrances to their harbors. Even temporary signal fires could help the next ship arrive without incident. The lighthouse was becoming more than a regional tradition. It was becoming an essential companion to global navigation. Still, many challenges remained. The brightest fires could be extinguished by fierce winds. Wooden towers weathered quickly beside the sea. Some of the most dangerous rocks stood so far offshore that building upon them seemed impossible. The growing world demanded stronger solutions. Engineers began imagining towers that could resist towering waves, survive relentless storms, and shine farther than ever before. They would need better materials, improved designs, and remarkable determination. The quiet beacon fires that had guided sailors for generations had served their purpose well. But the oceans of this new age were busier, ships were larger, and voyages stretched across entire continents. The humble coastal light was about to become something far more ambitious. A new generation of lighthouse builders was preparing to reshape the world's shorelines, one enduring tower at a time. As ships ventured farther across the world's oceans, the sea presented a challenge that no map or compass could solve. The most dangerous places were often the hardest to mark. Many coastlines were protected by rocky reefs that lay just beneath the surface. From a distance, the water appeared calm, giving little warning of the stone waiting below. During daylight, an experienced captain might notice the breaking waves that hinted at hidden danger. At night, those same rocks became nearly invisible. It was exactly where sailors needed a lighthouse most. Yet building one seemed almost impossible. Unlike the sturdy towers that overlooked sheltered harbors, these new lighthouses would have to stand in the sea itself. Some proposed sites were little more than lonely rocks that disappeared beneath crashing waves during storms. Builders could work only for a few hours each day, waiting for low tide before scrambling onto slippery stone with their tools. The ocean refused to make construction easy. Materials had to be carried by boat, carefully unloaded between the waves, and lifted onto foundations that were often no larger than a small cottage. Every mistake cost precious time, yet people continued trying. One of the earliest and most famous examples was the Eddystone Rocks, a dangerous reef lying several miles off the coast of Cornwall in southwest England. Countless ships sailing toward the English Channel had met disaster there, making it one of the most feared hazards in British waters. If a lighthouse could be built on the Eddystone, sailors believed almost anywhere could be protected. The first attempts were bold but fragile. In the late 17th century, an English engineer named Henry Winstanley designed an elaborate wooden lighthouse upon the reef. The tower was unlike anything seen before, decorated with balconies and ornamental features that reflected the architectural tastes of the era. It stood proudly above the waves. But the sea was unimpressed. During the Great Storm of 1703, one of the most violent storms ever recorded in southern England, the lighthouse was completely destroyed. Winstanley himself, who happened to be inside overseeing repairs, was lost along with the tower. The tragedy was a sobering reminder that beauty alone could not withstand the ocean. A second lighthouse soon replaced it. Designed by John Rudyard, this tower was simpler and stronger, relying on practical engineering rather than decoration. For many years, it successfully guided ships through dangerous waters. Yet disaster struck again when a fire broke out inside the wooden structure. The blaze consumed the lighthouse, ending another chapter in the struggle against the sea. Builders had learned an important lesson. Wood would never be enough. If these towers were to survive, they would need to become part of the rock itself. Across Europe, engineers began experimenting with stronger materials and new methods of construction. Massive blocks of granite and limestone replaced timber. Instead of stacking stones like ordinary buildings, craftsmen shaped each block so it locked tightly into the next, much like pieces of an enormous puzzle. This technique created towers capable of resisting both gravity and the relentless force of waves. The shape of the lighthouse also evolved. Earlier towers often featured straight sides, but engineers noticed that nature offered a better design. The trunks of ancient oak trees widened near their bases before tapering upward, allowing them to withstand powerful winds. The same principle worked beside the sea. Curved lighthouse walls encouraged waves to flow upward and around the structure instead of striking it with full force. Storms still battered the stone, but the towers endured. Inside these remarkable buildings, every inch of space served a purpose. The lowest levels stored food, tools, and fuel. Above them were modest living quarters where keepers slept, cooked, and escaped the weather. A narrow spiral staircase climbed through the center of the tower, leading to the lantern room at the very top. Every evening followed a familiar rhythm. The keeper climbed the stairs carrying oil, checked the lantern, cleaned the glass, and prepared the light before darkness settled over the sea. Outside, Gulls circled overhead, while waves continued their endless conversation with the rocks below. Some nights were calm enough that the ocean reflected the stars like polished glass. Other nights, storms shook the tower with astonishing force. Rain lashed the windows, wind howled through every crevice, and waves exploded against the walls with thunderous crashes. Yet the lantern continued burning above it all. To the sailors beyond the darkness, that steady light offered reassurance. Someone had prepared for their arrival. Someone had remained at their post. By the 18th century, lighthouse construction had become a specialized profession requiring remarkable skill. Architects, stonemasons, blacksmiths, sailors, and laborers worked together to solve problems that earlier generations had thought impossible. Each successful tower represented more than clever engineering. It represented persistence. The sea had challenged humanity for thousands of years, but people continued returning with better ideas, stronger materials, and renewed determination. The age of the modern lighthouse had truly begun. Soon, a new generation of engineers would perfect these ideas, creating towers so enduring that many still watch over the world's coastlines today, their lights continuing a tradition that has guided travelers for centuries. By the 18th century, the lighthouse had become something far more ambitious than a simple tower with a flame. It was now an engineering challenge. The world's busiest sea routes demanded structures that could survive where almost nothing else could. The success of an entire voyage could rest upon a single light continuing to shine through the night. Meeting that challenge required a new kind of builder. Not only architects or stonemasons, but visionaries willing to study the sea itself. Among the most influential was an English engineer named John Smeaton. Born in 1724, Smeaton possessed an endlessly curious mind. He was fascinated by machines, water wheels, windmills, and the hidden principles that governed the natural world. Rather than relying solely on tradition, he believed that careful observation could reveal better solutions. When he was asked to design a new lighthouse for the treacherous Eddystone Rocks, he approached the task differently from those who had come before him. Instead of asking how people had always built towers, he asked how nature built things that lasted. While walking through the countryside, Smeaton studied the shape of sturdy oak trees. Their trunks widened gracefully near the base before narrowing toward the branches, allowing them to withstand powerful winds year after year. He wondered whether a lighthouse could do the same. The tower he designed in the 1750s curved gently upward, its broad foundation firmly anchored to the rock below. Rather than resisting every wave with flat walls, its rounded shape encouraged water to flow around it, reducing the force of each impact. The stones themselves were remarkable. Each block was carefully carved so that it locked tightly into the next. Construction demanded extraordinary patience. Workers could only land on the rocks during calm weather and favorable tides. Boats waited offshore while teams hurried to unload tools and stone before the sea reclaimed the worksite. Every day required careful planning, for the ocean dictated the schedule. Months became years. At last, the new Eddystone Lighthouse stood complete. When storms arrived, sailors watched anxiously. Towering waves crashed against the granite walls, sending white spray high into the air. But the lighthouse remained. Season after season, it endured. Smeaton's success transformed lighthouse engineering. His ideas spread across Europe, proving that careful design could overcome even the harshest coastal conditions. Many later builders adopted his principles, and his lighthouse became a model for generations to come. Across the North Sea, another remarkable family was leaving its own lasting mark. The Stevensons of Scotland devoted themselves to lighting one of Europe's most rugged coastlines. Scotland's shores were unlike the gentler harbours of southern England. Jagged islands, hidden reefs, powerful tides, and fierce Atlantic storms created constant hazards for sailors. Fishing boats, merchant vessels, and naval ships all faced the same unforgiving waters. Improving navigation here required extraordinary determination. Robert Stevenson became the best known of the family. Beginning in the late 18th century, he oversaw the construction of numerous Scottish lighthouses, many in places so remote that reaching them was an adventure in itself. His projects often required transporting thousands of carefully cut stones to tiny islands surrounded by rough seas. Temporary camps were established where workers lived for months, separated from the mainland by weather that could change within hours. Life on these construction sites was demanding. The sound of waves became constant company. Supplies arrived only when conditions allowed. During violent storms, everyone waited patiently, knowing that the sea always had the final word. Yet little by little, new towers rose from the rocks. One of Stevenson's greatest achievements was the Bell Rock Lighthouse, completed in 1811 on a reef in the North Sea that disappeared entirely beneath high tide. For generations, ships had wrecked there because the danger could not be seen until it was too late. Building on a reef that vanished beneath the water seemed almost impossible. Still, the work continued. At low tide, teams hurried onto the exposed rock, shaping foundations before the returning sea forced them back to their boats. Each working day lasted only a few precious hours, but persistence accomplished what speed never could. When the lighthouse was finished, it transformed one of Britain's most dangerous stretches of coastline into a far safer passage. The Stevensons would go on to build many more lighthouses, creating a family legacy that stretched across decades. Their name became closely associated with reliability, craftsmanship, and quiet dedication. What united builders like Smeaton and Stevenson was not a desire for fame. Most travelers would never know who designed the towers that guided them safely home. The builders accepted this willingly. Their greatest reward came each evening, when the lantern was lit and another ship passed safely through the darkness. They understood that a lighthouse was not built for the present alone. It was built for generations yet to come. Long after the engineers themselves were gone, their towers would continue standing against wind and tide, faithfully keeping watch over the sea. And inside those towers, another group of equally dedicated people would begin their nightly work. The age of the lighthouse keeper was about to begin. A lighthouse was built of stone, but its true heartbeat came from the people who lived within it. A lighthouse was only useful if someone was there to keep the light burning. That responsibility belonged to the lighthouse keeper. For centuries, these quiet guardians lived in some of the most isolated places imaginable. They stood watch over empty stretches of coastline, lonely islands, and wave-battered rocks where few other people ever set foot. Their work was rarely celebrated. Most sailors who saw the light in the distance never knew the name of the person who had prepared it. They simply saw the light. And that was enough. Life inside a lighthouse followed the rhythm of the sea. Every day brought familiar tasks that had to be completed regardless of weather, season, or personal hardship. Even a small problem could have serious consequences. A dirty lens could reduce visibility. A damaged mechanism could prevent the light from showing its proper pattern. A neglected lamp could leave ships searching through darkness without guidance. For a keeper, there was no true day off. The ocean did not follow a schedule. The tower itself required constant care, as salt air slowly damaged metal, stone, and wood. Rust had to be removed. Paint had to be renewed. Storm damage had to be repaired whenever conditions allowed. Then, as evening approached, the most important part of the day began: preparing the light. The keeper climbed the spiral staircase toward the lantern room, carrying the tools and materials needed for the night ahead. At the top, surrounded by glass, the keeper entered the room where countless sailors would soon be searching for guidance. The lamp was lit. The lens was checked. The mechanism was started. And the lighthouse came alive. For some keepers, this moment brought a sense of purpose. The work was demanding, but they understood its importance. Their actions connected them to every ship passing through the darkness. They were part of a tradition older than their own lifetime. Yet the isolation could be difficult. Many lighthouses were built far from towns and communities. Some stood on small islands where the only connection to the outside world came through occasional supply boats. Others stood on offshore rocks where the keeper might spend weeks or even months surrounded only by waves and sky. The silence could be overwhelming. There were no streets filled with voices, no neighbors stopping by for conversation. No easy way to leave when loneliness arrived. Instead, keepers created their own routines. They read books brought from the mainland. They repaired tools. They tended gardens when conditions allowed. They wrote letters that might take days or weeks to reach their destinations. Some kept journals describing the changing moods of the sea. They recorded storms that shook the tower, unusual wildlife sightings, passing ships, and quiet moments when the ocean appeared completely still. These journals became valuable glimpses into a vanished way of life. For families who lived in lighthouses, the experience was even more unique. Children grew up with the ocean as their constant companion. Their playgrounds were rocky shores and tide pools. Their classrooms were often inside the lighthouse itself. They learned to recognize weather patterns and understood the power of the sea from an early age. Some children loved the adventure. Others dreamed of the mainland. The same isolation that created beautiful memories could also create challenges. Reaching school, receiving medical care, or simply visiting friends required careful planning. Yet many lighthouse families formed deep connections with their unusual homes. They watched seasons change from a perspective few people ever experienced. They saw storms arrive from across the horizon and witnessed sunsets that stretched endlessly over the water. They knew the coastline intimately. They knew which winds brought rain, which waves signaled changing weather, and which sound suggested a ship was approaching in the darkness. Perhaps the most difficult moments came during storms. When powerful weather arrived, lighthouse keepers became more than caretakers. They became lifelines. Waves could rise higher than the windows. Wind could shake the entire structure. Rain could fall so heavily that the world outside disappeared completely. During those nights, sailors depended on the light more than ever. And inside the tower, a keeper remained awake. The flame had to continue burning. The lighthouse had to continue turning. The signal had to remain visible. There was a quiet courage in that responsibility. No crowds witnessed these efforts. No applause followed. The keepers simply did what needed to be done because somewhere beyond the darkness, someone might need that light. Over time, the role of the lighthouse keeper became associated with patience, reliability, and devotion. They were the unseen guardians of the coast. They protected ships without ever meeting the people aboard them. They maintained towers they would eventually leave behind. They lived apart from the world so others could safely travel through it. Today, many automated systems have replaced the need for full-time keepers. The lonely rooms at the tops of towers are often quiet, their spiral staircases no longer carrying footsteps every evening. But the memory of lighthouse keepers remains. Every old journal, every weathered photograph, and every preserved tower tells the story of people who chose a remarkable life beside the sea. They kept the flame alive. And because they did, countless travelers found their way home. As ships traveled farther and oceans became busier, a new question emerged. How could a small flame become powerful enough to reach across miles of open water? The answer would come from centuries of experimentation, observation, and scientific discovery. The history of the lighthouse was not only a story of towers and builders, it was also a story of light itself. Early lighthouses relied on simple sources of illumination. Ancient beacons burned wood or charcoal. Later versions used candles, oil lamps, and other fuels. These methods could create a visible glow, but much of the light was scattered in every direction. The challenge was not simply creating a brighter flame. It was controlling the light. Engineers began searching for ways to gather and direct illumination so that more of it could travel outward toward the horizon. The solution would eventually transform the lighthouse from a simple warning signal into a precision instrument of navigation. One important advancement came in the 18th century with improvements to oil lamps. The Argand lamp, developed by Swiss inventor M. Argand, introduced a more efficient design that allowed fuel to burn more brightly and steadily. Unlike earlier lamps, which produced weak and inconsistent flames, the Argand lamp used a circular wick and improved airflow to create a stronger light. For lighthouse keepers, this was a major improvement. The flame burned cleaner. The light became brighter. The beacon became more reliable. But even the best lamp could only do so much. A bright light still needed a way to travel farther. That breakthrough arrived with the invention of the Fresnel lens. Named after French physicist Augustin-Jean Fresnel, this remarkable invention changed the future of lighthouses forever. Rather than using a thick, heavy glass lens like those found in magnifying devices, Fresnel designed a lens made of carefully shaped sections of glass arranged in a series of rings. The result was extraordinary. A large lens could be created without requiring an enormous amount of glass. More importantly, the lens could capture light from a lamp and focus it into a powerful beam visible from great distances. The lighthouse no longer simply produced light. It sent a message. A beam sweeping across the ocean told sailors exactly where they were. The pattern of flashes could identify one lighthouse from another, helping captains recognize specific locations even when multiple lights were visible along a coastline. Every lighthouse could have its own signature. Some flashed quickly. Some rotated slowly. Some displayed a pattern of bright and dark intervals that repeated throughout the night. To a sailor familiar with these signals, a lighthouse was like a familiar voice in the darkness. The development of rotating lenses added another layer of sophistication. Instead of producing a constant glow, many lighthouse systems used carefully designed mechanisms that turned the lens around the lamp. As the lens rotated, the focused beam swept across the sea. From the shore, the lighthouse appeared to blink. From the ocean, it became a moving signal. Inside the lantern room, these mechanisms were impressive examples of engineering. Before electricity, many rotating systems relied on clockwork mechanisms powered by heavy weights. Keepers had to regularly wind the machinery, ensuring the lens continued its steady movement throughout the night. The rhythm was precise. The gears turned. The lens rotated. The beam crossed the waves. Again and again. For lighthouse keepers, caring for the lens became one of their most important responsibilities. These enormous glass structures were delicate and expensive. A single fingerprint, piece of dust, or layer of salt buildup could reduce their effectiveness. The keeper polished each section carefully, often using special cloths and cleaning materials designed to protect the glass. The lantern room became a place of remarkable beauty. At night, surrounded by curved glass panels, the keeper stood among hundreds or even thousands of carefully arranged pieces of crystal. The light moved through the room in slow circles, casting reflections across the walls as the tower quietly watched over the sea. To someone standing inside, the experience could feel almost magical. Outside was darkness. Inside was movement and brilliance. The technology behind lighthouse illumination continued advancing throughout the 19th century. Oil lamps improved. Gas lighting was introduced in some locations. Eventually, electricity brought even greater reliability and power. Each advancement extended the reach of the lighthouse. A beacon that once guided ships only a few miles away could now be seen from much greater distances. But the purpose remained unchanged. The science existed for a simple human reason. Someone needed to find their way home. The great lenses of lighthouses represented the perfect combination of beauty and practicality. They were scientific instruments, but they were also works of art. Their carefully crafted glass patterns transformed a single flame into a sweeping signal that connected distant ships with the shore. For sailors crossing dark waters, the sight of a lighthouse beam moving across the horizon was unforgettable. It meant they were not alone. It meant someone had prepared the light. It meant that even in the vastness of the ocean, a path forward still existed. And as lighthouse technology reached new heights, these glowing towers became more than navigational tools. They became some of the most recognizable symbols of the relationship between humanity and the sea. Across the Atlantic Ocean, a new nation was beginning to understand the importance of the lighthouse. For centuries, European kingdoms had relied on coastal beacons to guide ships through dangerous waters. But as European settlers established communities along the shores of North America, they encountered a coastline unlike any they had known before. It was vast, it was unfamiliar, and it demanded its own network of guiding lights. The eastern coast of North America stretched for thousands of miles, filled with sheltered bays, wide rivers, rocky islands, and dangerous shoals. The need for lighthouses became clear almost immediately. One of the earliest examples appeared near Boston Harbor, where the busy waters surrounding Massachusetts created a natural center for trade. Ships carrying goods, supplies, and passengers arrived regularly, but the entrance to the harbor contained hazards that could threaten even experienced crews. In 1716, the first lighthouse in what would become the United States was established on Little Brewster Island. Known today as Boston Light, it became a symbol of a growing maritime nation. The lighthouse keeper who maintained the beacon had a simple but important responsibility: keep the flame burning so ships could safely find their way through the harbor entrance. At first, these early American lighthouses were relatively modest. But the coastline of North America presented countless challenges. Unlike the carefully charted waters surrounding many European ports, much of the American coastline remained difficult to navigate. Storms, fog, shifting sandbars, and hidden reefs created constant dangers. As the nation expanded, so did the need for more lights. During the 18th and 19th centuries, new ports emerged along the Atlantic coast. The ocean connected these places, but connection required safe passage. The federal government eventually took responsibility for expanding and maintaining America's lighthouse system. This allowed for more organized construction, better technology, and standardized care. Some lighthouses stood on peaceful shores overlooking quiet beaches. Others were built in places where even reaching the construction site was dangerous. Few locations demonstrated this challenge more clearly than Cape Hatteras on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. The Outer Banks were beautiful, but they were also deadly. These narrow barrier islands shifted constantly as wind and waves reshaped the sand. Offshore waters contained dangerous areas known by sailors as the graveyard of the Atlantic, because so many ships had been lost there. In 1870, the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse was completed, becoming one of the tallest brick lighthouses in the world. Its powerful light helped guide ships away from dangerous waters and became one of the most recognizable towers in America. The lighthouse stood as a reminder that even the most difficult coastlines could be made safer. Farther north, another famous lighthouse watched over the entrance to Long Island Sound. Montauk Point Lighthouse, completed in 1796, became an important guide for ships traveling along the northeastern coast. Positioned at the eastern end of Long Island, it helped sailors recognize their location as they approached one of the busiest maritime regions in America. Each lighthouse developed its own personality. Some were tall and narrow. Some were broad and sturdy. Some were painted with distinctive patterns so sailors could identify them during daylight hours. To coastal communities, they became familiar landmarks. Children grew up seeing their silhouettes against the horizon. Fishermen used them as reference points when returning home. Travelers photographed them and carried their images far beyond the places where they stood. The lighthouse became part of the American landscape. But behind every tower was a story of human dedication. Keepers lived in remote locations, maintaining the lights through every season. Along the Atlantic coast, this often meant preparing for hurricanes, winter storms, and powerful coastal winds. A keeper's work continued regardless of conditions. When ships needed guidance most, the lighthouse needed to shine brightest. During the 19th century, improvements in lighthouse technology made these towers even more effective. Fresnel lenses allowed smaller lamps to produce powerful beams visible across greater distances. Better construction techniques created taller and more durable structures. America's coastline slowly became a chain of lights. From Maine's rocky shores to the warm waters of Florida, lighthouses marked dangerous passages and welcomed ships into safe harbors. They stood through periods of incredible change. They watched wooden sailing ships give way to steam-powered vessels. They saw small coastal towns grow into major cities. They witnessed generations of sailors leave and return beneath their steady beams. The lighthouse represented something deeply connected to the American experience. A nation built around exploration and movement needed places that offered direction. As settlers moved westward and industries expanded, the ocean remained one of the country's greatest pathways. Every ship that arrived safely carried not only cargo but stories, ideas, and connections between distant communities. And standing along the shore, quietly watching over it all, was the lighthouse, a tower built from stone and glass, a place where a single keeper could make a difference, a symbol that even along a vast and unfamiliar coastline, there would always be a light showing the way home. Along the northeastern coast of America, the relationship between people and the sea was unlike anywhere else. Here, the ocean was not merely a route to distant places. It was a way of life. For generations, coastal communities in New England depended on the water for survival. Fishing boats left harbors before sunrise, merchant vessels carried goods between growing towns, and families built their homes within sight of the waves. The sea provided opportunity, but it also demanded respect. The coastline of New England was beautiful, yet it was filled with hidden dangers. Rocky islands, narrow channels, shifting currents, and sudden storms made navigation difficult even for experienced sailors. Unlike the warmer, more predictable waters found in some regions, New England's coast tested both ships and the people who guided them. A lighthouse here was not simply a marker. It was a guardian. One of the most famous examples was Portland Headlight in Maine. Standing at the entrance to Portland Harbor, the lighthouse overlooked one of the busiest maritime areas in northern New England. Its location reflected a common theme among lighthouse construction, protecting the places where land and sea met. Harbors were places of arrival and departure. A lighthouse near the entrance meant that even after sunset, the journey could continue. For sailors approaching the coast, the first sight of a lighthouse after a long voyage was unforgettable. Imagine a wooden sailing vessel moving through the cold waters of the Atlantic. The crew has spent days battling waves and wind. The shoreline remains hidden beneath darkness, and the only sounds are the creaking of the ship and the steady movement of the ocean. Then, in the distance, a flash appears. The crew recognizes the light. They know where they are. They know they are close to safety. This connection between lighthouse and sailor created a deep emotional bond throughout New England. The towers became part of local identity, appearing on maps, paintings, postcards, and family stories. But behind their beauty was a demanding reality. Life as a lighthouse keeper in New England required patience and resilience. The weather could be harsh. Winter storms brought freezing temperatures, heavy snow, and powerful winds. Salt spray covered windows and metal surfaces. Waves battered exposed towers, sometimes shaking the very foundations beneath them. A keeper could not simply wait for better conditions. The light had to continue. During long winter nights, a keeper climbed the tower stairs while much of the coastline slept. The lantern was prepared, the lens cleaned, and the machinery inspected. Outside, the ocean continued its endless movement. Inside, one person kept watch. Many keepers developed a deep connection with the places they guarded. They learned the personality of their coastline. They knew which winds signaled approaching storms. They recognized the sounds of different vessels and could often identify ships by their lights alone. The lighthouse became their entire world. For families who lived at these stations, the experience was both challenging and unforgettable. Children grew up surrounded by ocean views instead of city streets. Their daily lives were shaped by tides, seasons, and weather. They explored rocky beaches, collected shells, and watched seabirds circle above the water. The lighthouse was not just a workplace. It was home. Yet the isolation could be difficult. Supply boats might be delayed by storms. Trips to nearby towns required careful planning. During severe weather, the outside world could feel impossibly distant. Still, many families looked back on their years in lighthouses with affection. They remembered the beauty of quiet mornings, the sound of waves below the tower, and the breathtaking sight of sunsets stretching across the horizon. New England's lighthouses also became connected to stories and legends. Every coastline has its mysteries, and the rocky shores of the Northeast inspired countless tales. Sailors spoke of strange lights in the fog, ghostly ships appearing offshore, and mysterious sounds carried across the water. Whether fact or folklore, these stories reflected the powerful atmosphere of the coast. A lighthouse standing alone on a cliff naturally inspired imagination. It was a place where land ended and the unknown began. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, New England's lighthouses continued serving an essential role. They guided fishing fleets, protected merchant ships, and helped growing coastal cities remain connected to the world. They witnessed enormous changes. Wooden ships gave way to steam-powered vessels. Small fishing villages became bustling ports. Navigation technology continued to improve. But the lighthouse remained. Even as ships became more advanced, sailors still appreciated the reassurance of seeing a familiar beacon along the shore. Today, many of New England's lighthouses no longer require full-time keepers, but their presence continues to shape the coastline. They stand as reminders of the people who lived within them, the storms they endured, and the countless journeys they helped complete. They are symbols of patience and perseverance. They remind us of a time when a single person, standing high above the sea with a lantern glowing beside them, could help guide an entire ship safely home. And along the quiet shores of New England, where waves continue to meet stone and sand, these lonely lights still tell the same story. The ocean may be vast, the night may be dark, but somewhere along the coast, a light is always waiting. Around the world, lighthouses reflected the cultures, landscapes, and challenges of the places where they were built. In the Mediterranean, where the tradition of the lighthouse first flourished, ancient ideas continued evolving. The region remained one of the busiest maritime crossroads on Earth, connecting Europe, Africa, and Asia. The islands and coastlines of the Mediterranean were filled with important ports, and each harbor developed its own methods of welcoming ships home. Some ancient towers were restored and adapted, while new lighthouses appeared to guide increasingly advanced vessels. Every harbor represented a meeting point between cultures, languages, and traditions. A ship arriving safely brought more than goods. It brought stories from distant places and ideas that could change the communities it reached. Farther north, the coastlines of Scandinavia presented a completely different challenge. Here, sailors faced freezing temperatures, rocky shores, and long periods of darkness during winter months. The waters around Norway, Sweden, and Denmark were filled with islands and narrow passages that required careful navigation. For centuries, Scandinavian sailors had developed exceptional knowledge of the sea. They understood currents, winds, and seasonal patterns. But even the most skilled navigators benefited from a reliable light along dangerous stretches of coastline. Lighthouses became especially important as maritime trade expanded. Fishing communities depended on them to return safely after long days at sea. Merchant ships used them while traveling through northern waters. Coastal settlements grew around harbors protected by these guiding towers. Some Scandinavian lighthouses were built in remote locations where isolation became part of daily life. Keepers faced powerful storms, icy winds, and months when daylight itself seemed limited. Yet the same dedication found in lighthouse stations around the world continued here. Someone had to keep the light burning. On the other side of the globe, Japan developed its own important lighthouse tradition. As an island nation, Japan has always been closely connected to the sea. The country's long shoreline contained countless bays, islands, and narrow channels where accurate guidance was essential. During Japan's modernization in the 19th century, lighthouse construction expanded significantly. Engineers combined local knowledge with new international techniques, creating a network of coastal lights that supported growing maritime activity. Japanese lighthouses often reflected a careful balance between function and design. Many were built in locations where the surrounding landscape became part of their identity, standing against cliffs, overlooking quiet bays, or watching over busy shipping routes. They became familiar landmarks for coastal communities. In Australia and New Zealand, Lighthouses faced some of the most isolated coastlines on Earth. These regions were separated from many major population centers by enormous distances, making maritime travel essential. Ships carried supplies, connected settlements, and explored waters that were often unpredictable. Australia's coastline presented unique dangers. Strong currents, reefs, and remote stretches of shore created difficult conditions for sailors. Lighthouses were built to mark dangerous areas and guide ships around hazards that could otherwise remain invisible. New Zealand faced similar challenges, with steep cliffs, narrow passages, and powerful ocean conditions surrounding its islands. The lighthouses built there became symbols of endurance. They represented humanity's determination to create safe pathways through some of the world's most challenging environments. Africa's coastlines also became home to important lighthouses as maritime trade expanded. From the Mediterranean shores of North Africa to the Atlantic and Indian Ocean coasts, these structures helped guide ships through busy trade routes. Many stood near ports that connected continents and supported the movement of goods between distant civilizations. Each lighthouse carried the character of its surroundings. A lighthouse in a tropical climate faced different challenges than one surrounded by icy northern waters. A tower built on a rocky island required different solutions than one standing on a sandy coastline. But the mission remained unchanged. Provide a warning. Offer direction. Guide travelers safely through the night. Perhaps this is what makes lighthouses so fascinating. They are both universal and unique. A lighthouse in Maine and a lighthouse in Japan may look completely different. Their construction methods, landscapes, and histories may vary dramatically. Yet the sight of their lights crossing the darkness represents the same human desire, the desire to help. Throughout history, people have looked toward the horizon and wondered what lies beyond it. They have built ships, explored unknown waters, and traveled farther than previous generations ever imagined. But exploration has always required a path back. The lighthouse became that path. It stood at the edge of the known world, marking the boundary between land and sea. It reminded sailors that even when they traveled far from home, someone had created a place of guidance waiting for their return. From ancient Mediterranean harbors to remote Pacific islands, from frozen northern coasts to tropical shores, lighthouses became part of the global story of exploration. They were not owned by any single nation. They belonged to everyone who ever searched the darkness for a familiar light. By the 19th century, lighthouses had become an essential part of the world's maritime network. The age of exploration had transformed the oceans into highways of commerce. With this growth came a new responsibility. The world needed more lights. It needed a complete network of reliable structures capable of guiding ships through every type of coastline imaginable. This period became the golden age of lighthouse construction. Across Europe, North America, and other parts of the world, governments and maritime organizations invested heavily in building new towers, improving old ones, and creating systems that allowed sailors to navigate with greater confidence. Every coast had its challenges. Some regions required towers on tall cliffs overlooking open water. Others needed lights built on small islands or dangerous reefs. Some had to warn ships away from hidden rocks, while others marked the entrances to busy harbors. Each location demanded a unique solution. The builders of this era were not simply constructing buildings. They were solving problems created by nature itself. One of the greatest changes came from improvements in construction methods. Engineers developed stronger foundations, better materials, and more efficient designs. Towers became taller and more durable, allowing their lights to reach farther across the sea. Granite became a favorite material for many coastal structures because of its incredible strength. Unlike wood, which could rot and weaken over time, stone could endure decades of salt, wind, and waves. Each block had to fit precisely with the ones around it. The foundation had to be strong enough to support the weight of the tower while resisting the constant movement of the ocean. Every detail mattered because failure could mean disaster. Some of the most impressive towers of this period were built in locations where the environment seemed determined to prevent human success. Offshore reefs remained among the greatest challenges. Workers often had to build temporary platforms on rocks that disappeared beneath waves. The process required patience beyond ordinary construction. A building project on land could continue through changing seasons. A lighthouse on a reef had to wait for the sea to allow it. These challenges created a special group of engineers and craftsmen who became known for their ability to work in impossible places. They studied waves, tides, and weather patterns. They learned how storms moved and how water struck against different shapes. Their knowledge transformed lighthouse building from a practical craft into a sophisticated science. At the same time, the appearance of lighthouses began to change. Some featured elegant stonework, decorative windows, and distinctive patterns that made them recognizable from the sea. A lighthouse needed to be seen, not only at night, but during the day. Painted designs became especially useful. Horizontal stripes, spirals, and contrasting colors allowed sailors to identify one tower from another before the lantern was even visible. A lighthouse was becoming a signature of its coastline. The expansion of lighthouse systems also changed the lives of the keepers who maintained them. As more towers were built, lighthouse services became organized institutions. Keeper training improved, maintenance standards became more consistent, and families who lived in these remote stations became part of a larger community connected by the shared responsibility of protecting sailors. For many keepers, the 19th century represented the height of their profession. They were respected members of coastal communities. Their work was difficult, but it carried a clear sense of purpose. Every night, they performed the same ritual that generations before them had followed. The lamp was prepared. The lens was cleaned. The machinery was checked. The light was raised into the darkness. Meanwhile, the world around them was changing rapidly. Steamships began replacing many sailing vessels. Railroads connected inland cities with coastal ports. International trade expanded at an incredible pace. Ships no longer depended only on wind and currents. They became faster, more powerful, and capable of traveling on schedules. But speed brought new challenges. A ship traveling faster had less time to react to danger. A busy shipping route required more accurate navigation. The need for dependable lighthouses became greater than ever. By the end of the 19th century, thousands of lighthouses stood around the world. They marked coastlines, protected harbors, and guided ships through some of the most dangerous waters on Earth. They had become symbols of progress. But they were also symbols of something quieter. A lighthouse represented preparation. It represented the belief that people could study the forces of nature and create safety within uncertainty. It showed that even against the enormous power of the ocean, careful planning and determination could make a difference. The golden age of lighthouse construction created some of the most beautiful and enduring structures ever built along the shore. Many of these towers still stand today. They remain as reminders of a time when a single light, maintained by human hands, connected distant ships with the safety of land. And as the 20th century approached, another transformation was beginning. The lighthouse had mastered stone, glass, and flame. Now it would enter the age of electricity, automation, and modern technology. For centuries, the lighthouse depended on a simple relationship: a person, a flame, and the determination to keep that flame alive. But as the 19th century came to an end, the world around these towers was changing faster than ever before. The industrial age had transformed nearly every part of human life. And at sea, ships were becoming larger, faster, and more powerful. The lighthouse had to evolve with them. The greatest transformation came from electricity. For generations, lighthouse keepers had worked with oil, gas, and mechanical systems that required constant attention. These technologies had improved navigation dramatically, but they still depended on human effort every night. Electricity offered something new: a brighter, more consistent, and more easily controlled source of light. Early experiments with electric illumination began in the 19th century. Arc lamps, which produced intense light by creating an electrical spark between two carbon rods, quickly attracted attention from lighthouse engineers. The brightness was remarkable. A single electric lamp could produce a beam far more powerful than traditional oil lamps. For important locations where ships traveled through especially dangerous waters, this technology offered a new level of safety. But early electric systems also presented challenges. Generating electricity near remote coastal locations was difficult. Equipment required careful maintenance, and many lighthouse stations were located far from the infrastructure needed to support electrical power. The transition was gradual. Some of the world's most important lighthouses adopted electricity first, while smaller stations continued using traditional fuels for many years. Even with these challenges, the future was clear. The age of the flame was ending. The age of the electric beacon had begun. One of the most remarkable changes was the reduction in the keeper's workload. Automated systems could control many functions that had previously required constant attention. Motors could rotate lenses. Electrical switches could regulate lamps. Timers and sensors could eventually turn lights on and off without direct human involvement. For lighthouse keepers, this represented a dramatic shift. Their role had always been built around personal responsibility. The keeper's hands had cleaned the lens, adjusted the lamp, and maintained the machinery. Now, Technology was beginning to take over those tasks. At first, automation was welcomed as a practical improvement. Maintaining a lighthouse in a remote location was difficult and sometimes dangerous. Reducing the number of tasks required during storms or harsh weather made these stations safer. But automation also marked the beginning of the end of a unique way of life. For centuries, lighthouse families had lived in towers overlooking the sea. Children had grown up surrounded by waves and weather. Keepers had formed quiet communities connected by their shared responsibility. As technology advanced, many of those homes slowly became empty. The lighthouse remained, but the human presence inside began to disappear. This change did not happen overnight. Throughout the 20th century, many keepers continued serving at stations around the world. They maintained equipment, recorded weather conditions, assisted ships, and carried forward a tradition that stretched back generations. But fewer people were needed. A single automated system could perform tasks that once required an entire team. The relationship between lighthouse and keeper was changing. During this same period, navigation itself underwent a revolution. Radio communication allowed ships to exchange information across enormous distances. Radar helped vessels detect objects even when visibility was poor. Later, satellite navigation systems would provide incredibly precise location information. For the first time in history, ships could navigate without depending entirely on the sight of a distant tower. The lighthouse was no longer the only guide. Yet it did not become meaningless. Even as technology advanced, mariners continued to value traditional navigation aids. Lighthouses provided visual confirmation, especially near coastlines where precision was essential. A captain could look toward shore and immediately understand their position. A familiar light pattern could still provide reassurance. Beyond their practical purpose, lighthouses had become something greater. They had become symbols. By the 20th century, many people viewed these towers as reminders of another era. They represented patience in a world becoming increasingly fast. They represented human effort in an age of machines. A lighthouse was a place where someone had once stood alone through the night, watching over an endless ocean. It carried memories of keepers climbing spiral staircases, of families watching storms from lantern rooms, of sailors searching the horizon for a familiar flash. As electricity transformed the lighthouse, it did not erase its history. Instead, it created a bridge between the old world and the new. The light became brighter. The machinery became more reliable. The need for constant human attention slowly faded. But the purpose remained exactly the same: to guide, to warn, to help people find their way through the darkness. And as the 20th century continued, lighthouses faced their greatest challenge yet. Not storms, not waves, but a world where technology could guide ships without them. The question became whether these historic towers would fade into the past or find a new purpose for future generations. By the middle of the 20th century, the lighthouse stood at a crossroads. For hundreds of years, these towers had represented the height of human determination against the power of the sea. They had guided explorers across unknown waters, protected merchant ships carrying valuable cargo, and helped countless sailors return safely to shore. But the world was changing. New technologies were reshaping navigation faster than anyone could have imagined. Ships were no longer guided only by the stars, the compass, and the distant glow of a lighthouse. Radio signals, radar systems, and eventually satellites began offering sailors new ways to understand their position. The lighthouse, once the most important tool in maritime navigation, was entering a new era. Its purpose was changing. For centuries, a lighthouse existed because someone needed to be there. The light was a human responsibility. But automation slowly transformed this relationship. Electrical systems allowed lamps to operate without constant attention. Automatic controls could turn lights on at the correct time each evening and shut them off at sunrise. Rotating lenses could continue moving without a keeper winding the machinery by hand. The technology that made lighthouses more reliable also made them less dependent on people. One by one, remote stations began losing their keepers. For some, this transition was welcomed. Lighthouse life had always been demanding, and isolation could create enormous challenges. Automation meant fewer people had to endure dangerous storms, limited supplies, and long periods away from their communities. But for others, the change represented the end of something special. A lighthouse had never been only a machine. It had been a home, a workplace, a place filled with memories. When keepers left, many towers became quiet in a way they had never been before. The spiral staircases no longer carried footsteps each evening. The lantern rooms no longer glowed with the presence of someone carefully maintaining the light. The tower remained, but the human stories inside began to fade. Still, lighthouses continued serving an important purpose. Even in an age of advanced technology, ships still needed visual references along the coast. Electronic systems could fail. Weather could interfere with signals. A physical landmark standing on a familiar shoreline offered something technology could not completely replace. A lighthouse was dependable. It was visible. It was real. For many sailors, seeing a lighthouse still carried emotional meaning beyond navigation. It represented arrival. It represented safety. It represented the final stage of a journey. As maritime technology advanced, many lighthouses found new roles beyond guiding ships. Some became museums where visitors could learn about coastal history. Others became historic landmarks preserved by communities that recognized their cultural importance. People began seeing lighthouses not only as tools of navigation, but as symbols of perseverance. They represented a slower world, a world where patience mattered, a world where one person's careful work could protect hundreds of strangers they would never meet. This changing perspective created a movement to preserve historic lighthouses. Across coastlines around the world, communities began restoring old towers that had fallen into disrepair. Volunteers painted walls, repaired lantern rooms, and reopened buildings that had once seemed destined to disappear. Many preservation efforts were driven by former lighthouse communities. Families who had lived in these stations understood their importance. They knew that a lighthouse was more than stone and glass. It held memories. It held stories. It held the history of everyone who had depended upon it. Some restored lighthouses became places where visitors could experience what life had once been like for keepers. They could climb the same narrow staircases, stand inside the lantern room, and look across the same waters that generations of sailors had watched before them. For a moment, the past felt close. A visitor could imagine the keeper preparing the lamp during a stormy night. They could picture ships searching the darkness for the familiar flash of light. They could understand why these towers inspired such loyalty and affection. The lighthouse had become a bridge between history and the present. Even as many traditional lighthouses became monuments, new versions continued to exist. Modern navigation towers, equipped with advanced lighting systems and solar power, still mark important coastal locations around the world. They may look different from the grand stone towers of the past. They may require fewer people, but their purpose remains unchanged. A warning, a guide, a signal of safety. The story of the lighthouse is ultimately a story of adaptation. These structures survived because they changed with the world around them. They moved from wood fires to oil lamps, from Fresnel lenses to electricity, from human caretakers to automated systems. Each transformation allowed them to continue their mission. The lighthouse was never truly about the technology inside. It was about the connection it created between those at sea and those waiting on land. That connection remains powerful today. A lighthouse standing on a cliff or island reminds us that even as the world becomes faster and more advanced, some symbols remain timeless. A light shining through darkness still means the same thing it always has. Someone is watching. A path exists, and home is not far away. A lighthouse begins as a practical creation. It is built because ships need guidance. It stands because dangerous waters require warning. But over time, something unexpected happened. The lighthouse became more than a tool. It became a symbol. Across the world, these towers came to represent hope, endurance, and the connection between people separated by vast stretches of water. They became part of paintings, stories, photographs, and memories. Long after many stopped serving as essential navigation points, they continued to inspire those who looked toward the shore. A lighthouse stands at a unique place. It exists between two worlds. Behind it lies the safety of land. Before it stretches the endless uncertainty of the sea. That position has always captured the imagination. For centuries, artists have been drawn to lighthouses. Painters captured their silhouettes against dramatic skies, showing towers surrounded by crashing waves or glowing beneath quiet sunsets. Writers used them as settings for stories about isolation, discovery, and the mysteries of the ocean. The image of a lighthouse became especially powerful because of the role it played in human journeys. Every person who saw a lighthouse from the sea was experiencing a moment of transition. They were leaving one place behind and approaching another. The light marked the space between adventure and arrival. This emotional connection helped lighthouses become deeply connected to coastal communities. In many towns, The lighthouse became part of local identity. It appeared on flags, signs, postcards, and town symbols. Generations grew up with the same tower watching over their harbor. For fishermen, it represented the beginning and end of each journey. For families waiting on shore, it represented the possibility of a safe return. For visitors, it became a reminder of the history and character of the coastline. Many communities developed traditions around their lighthouses. Festivals celebrated historic towers. Preservation groups formed to protect them. Local stories were collected and shared so that future generations would understand their importance. The lighthouse became a connection between the present and the past. One reason these structures remain so fascinating is the contrast they represent. A lighthouse is both strong and fragile. Its stone walls can withstand centuries of storms, yet the light inside depends on careful maintenance. It stands alone against enormous natural forces, yet it exists entirely to help others. This contrast has made the lighthouse a powerful metaphor. People often compare life's challenges to storms at sea. They speak of finding a guiding light during difficult times. They describe individuals who provide support and direction as lighthouses for others. The symbolism feels natural because the original purpose of these towers was always about helping someone find their way. Even literature and popular culture embraced this idea. Stories set near lighthouses often explore themes of isolation, mystery, and discovery. A lighthouse keeper living alone on a distant shore became a familiar character, representing someone who chooses responsibility over comfort. The image of a solitary figure tending a flame in the darkness captured something universal. The idea that one person's effort could make a difference for people they might never meet. Beyond storytelling, lighthouses also became important places of reflection. Many visitors today climb lighthouse stairs not because they need navigation assistance, but because they want to experience the view, the history, and the feeling of standing at the edge of the world. From the top of a lighthouse, the landscape feels different. The shoreline stretches outward. The ocean seems endless. The horizon becomes a reminder of all the journeys that have begun and ended in that same place. Standing there, it is easy to imagine the generations who came before, the keepers who climbed those stairs, the sailors who searched for that beam of light, the builders who placed each stone, the families who called the tower home. A lighthouse preserves all of those stories. This cultural legacy has also inspired efforts to protect historic towers around the world. As technology replaced many traditional lighthouse functions, people faced a decision. Would these structures simply disappear, or would they become something new? In many places, communities chose preservation. Old lighthouse stations were restored and opened to visitors. Former keeper houses became museums. Lantern rooms were carefully repaired so people could once again experience the view that had guided sailors for generations. Preservation transformed lighthouses from working tools into living history. They became reminders of human creativity and perseverance. Today, a modern traveler may visit a lighthouse without ever needing its beam for navigation. They may walk along a coastal path, climb a weathered staircase, and look out across the same waters that sailors once crossed with only a compass and a distant light to guide them. The technology may have changed. The world may have become faster. But the feeling remains. A lighthouse still represents reassurance. It still represents the belief that darkness does not have to mean being lost. After thousands of years, from ancient fires on coastal hills to automated beacons powered by modern systems, the lighthouse continues to tell one timeless story. Someone prepared a light. Someone stood watch. Someone believed that every traveler deserved a way home. As the night settles along the coastline, the sea begins to change. The waves become darker. The horizon disappears. The sounds of the shore become softer until there is little left except the rhythm of the water and the wind moving across the land. And somewhere along that coastline, a lighthouse stands. Perhaps it is an ancient stone tower that has watched centuries pass. Perhaps it is a modern beacon powered by technology far removed from the flames of the past. Perhaps it is a quiet landmark visited by travelers who come not because they need its guidance, but because they want to feel connected to its story. No matter its form, the lighthouse continues to represent something much larger than itself. It represents humanity's desire to create order in an uncertain world. For thousands of years, people have looked across the ocean and understood both its beauty and its danger. The sea offered exploration, discovery, and opportunity, but it also demanded respect. Without reliable guidance, even the most experienced sailors could become lost. The lighthouse became the answer. It was a promise built from stone, glass, and light. A promise that no matter how dark the journey became, there would always be a signal waiting. The earliest coastal fires were simple beginnings. They were small attempts to help travelers recognize familiar shores. But over time, those flames became magnificent towers, shaped by the knowledge and determination of countless generations. Ancient builders created some of the first great beacons of the world. Engineers learned how to construct towers on dangerous reefs and isolated islands. Inventors developed lenses capable of transforming a single flame into a powerful beam stretching across the sea. Keepers dedicated their lives to maintaining those lights through storms, loneliness, and endless nights. Every improvement, every innovation, and every act of dedication contributed to the same goal: helping someone find their way. The history of lighthouses is filled with remarkable achievements, but perhaps its most meaningful stories are the quiet ones. They belong to the people who were rarely recognized. The workers who carried heavy stones across dangerous waters. The craftsmen who shaped towers piece by piece. The families who lived in remote stations far from the rest of the world. The keepers who climbed the stairs each evening and ensured that the light never disappeared. Their efforts often went unnoticed. A sailor passing safely through the darkness might never know who kept the beacon burning. But that was the nature of the work. The lighthouse keeper was not there for recognition. They were there because someone, somewhere, might need that light. That simple act of responsibility is what has allowed lighthouses to remain powerful symbols across generations. They remind us that small actions can have enormous consequences. A single flame can guide a ship. A single person can protect hundreds of lives. A single tower can become a source of comfort for everyone who sees it. The world surrounding the lighthouse has changed dramatically. Ships have become larger and faster. Navigation has moved from handwritten charts to advanced digital systems. Technology has transformed the way people cross oceans. Yet the lighthouse continues to hold meaning because its importance was never only about navigation. It was always about hope. A lighthouse is a reminder that even in the darkest conditions, preparation and perseverance matter. It tells us that challenges do not have to be eliminated before we move forward. Sometimes, we simply need a guide, a point of reference, a light in the distance. Today, many lighthouses stand quietly along the shores where they have always watched. Some continue guiding ships. Others have become museums, historic landmarks, and reminders of the people who came before. Visitors climb their staircases and look through their lantern rooms. They imagine the storms that passed. They imagine the ships that appeared on the horizon. They imagine the keepers who stood there, watching and waiting. And for a moment, they become part of the same story. A story that began thousands of years ago and continues today. The lighthouse is not merely a building. It is a symbol of connection. It connects the shore with the sea, the past with the present, the traveler with the destination, the uncertain journey with the hope of arrival. Perhaps that is why lighthouses continue to inspire people long after their practical purpose has changed. They remind us that every journey contains moments of darkness. Every person faces uncertainty. Every path has challenges hidden beyond the horizon. But throughout history, people have always found ways to create light. They have built beacons. They have shared knowledge. They have guided one another home. And so, as the waves continue to roll against the shore and the stars appear above the water, the lighthouse remains where it has always been, standing quietly, watching patiently, sending its message across the darkness, not with words, but with light. A reminder that no matter how far we travel, no matter how uncertain the waters become, there is always a way forward. There is always a guide. There is always a light waiting. Good night.